Tonight, Iran seizes 2 U.S. boats and holds 10 Americans hostage. And Barack Obama apologizes. It's January 13th, and you're watching the Ezra Levant Show.
Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government about why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
Yesterday, right before Barack Obama's State of the Union address, the dictatorship of Iran seized 2 U.S. vessels in the Persian Gulf and took 10 Americans hostage. They were 2 small, fast boats, like these ones shown here, the kind of boats that move quickly and deftly in narrow waters, crowded waters, shallow waters, very high speed, very maneuverable, almost like a Jeep in the water. As you can see, just stuffed with weapons. I think those are actually Marines on them, pretty much the toughest fighting force in the world. So 2 of these boats from the world's largest and most powerful military, the best trained, best equipped fighters in the world, were just captured by Iran in the middle of the Persian Gulf, which is jammed with other bigger U.S. ships and aircraft. How did that just happen? Look at these gleeful videos released by Iran. Those Americans with their hands on their head, just humiliated. But look at the crummy little Iranian boats in the back there that conquered and seized the American vessels. How did that happen? I mean, they look like fishing boats, and maybe some Iranian guy would have an AK-47 or something. So don't tell me that Iran truly captured these 2 boats. Don't tell me, as one Obama official claimed, that there were mechanical problems. Really? 2 state-of-the-art ships both had mechanical problems at the same time that caused them to be captured, huh? So the motors stopped working and the guns stopped working and everything stopped working at the same time. I mean, look at all the equipment and weapons on the U.S. boats that the Iranians just helped themselves to. I'm sorry, I do not believe the official story. What is far more plausible to me is that these fighting men and women, the best trained, best equipped in the world, were given an order by a politicized commander, perhaps from Washington even, to surrender without a fight. Do you really think those Americans couldn't have turned those little Iranian boats into matchsticks 10 times over, even if they themselves had mechanical problems? Here are more images of U.S. Fighting forces being humiliated. These videos are from Iranian state TV. So Iran is gleefully using this as propaganda, and why not? They have just proved to their own people and to the whole world they can make the greatest military power, the greatest democracy in the world, grovel and beg and plead and surrender. I mean, wouldn't you do a victory lap too if you were the Ayatollahs? Look at the female Marine. The U.S. military is sex integrated. They are in a holding room here, and that American woman has had a hijab put on her head, a Muslim-style head covering. Well, at least she wasn't taken away to be raped, as Iran has done to captured women in the past, like the Canadian photographer Zara Kazemi. So this was all going on last night, right before Obama's State of the Union address. It was Iran's way of saying, we can do anything, and America is impotent. We can violate any law, any treaty, any norm, and Obama is so weak, so desperate to claim that he has some deal, any deal with Iran, that he will literally suffer any diplomatic or military humiliation, and he will literally abide Americans being held hostage and not even breathe a word about it in his State of the Union address. And why not? Just a few weeks ago, Iran deliberately shot missiles right near a U.S. aircraft carrier in the Gulf. Here's footage by the U.S. Navy showing Iranian ships, those little pipsqueak boats, like the ones that captured the riverine craft, firing warning shots dangerously close to a U.S. aircraft carrier, the USS Truman, with complete impunity. Iran knows it can do anything, and Obama won't punch back. He won't even talk back. By the way, it is illegal under international law, like the Geneva Conventions, under the customary laws of war, to use military prisoners this way, to photograph them and use them as propaganda. That's illegal, but that's the thing about Iran. It knows it could literally do anything to America, and Obama would let it pass. So Iran made these captured Americans dance to their tune. Here, listen to them getting a captured Marine to apologize on camera.
was a mistake. That was our fault, and we apologize for our mistake.
Apologizing? Thanking the Iranians for their wonderful hospitality? So generous, the Iranians. Just wonderful. Here, watch.
How was the Iranian behavior with you?
The Iranian behavior was fantastic while we were here. We thank you very much for your hospitality and your assistance.
I don't know a lot of Marines, but I'm going to guess that he's saying that under duress to save his own life, or more likely to save the lives of his colleagues and make sure the woman there does not get raped by the Iranians. We'll have to wait to hear from that Marine afterwards if Obama allows him to speak to the public, which I highly doubt. In Vietnam, when the Viet Cong would shoot down an American pilot, they would force these Americans to speak under duress to make false confessions. But the Americans did interesting tricks, like this American who blinked in Morse code with his eyelids the word torture while he was reading a forced statement. Isn't that clever? Or take a look at this propaganda picture here, where the American was making the middle swear finger just as symbols to the West that all was not well, that they were being mistreated gravely, to try to undermine the Vietnamese propaganda. Now, those American POWs in Vietnam had months or even years to think about those little acts of resistance, like blinking in Morse code. I don't expect that these Marines seized yesterday would have had the time or to be in a position to do something like that, and I absolutely don't blame them for saying anything under threat of torture or murder. That's their excuse, and it's legitimate. But what about Barack Obama's excuse? Here, look at what his press secretary, Josh Earnest, said to CNN yesterday. Jake Tapper is the journalist. What would any self-respecting country do, let alone the leader of the free world in this situation? What would they even say? Well, here, watch, take a look.
Well, Jake, I can tell you that U.S. officials have been in touch with the Iranians about this situation. This is obviously a situation that we're monitoring closely. We've received assurances from the Iranians, both that our sailors are safe, that they're being sort of afforded care, the proper courtesy that you would expect. And we've also most importantly received assurances that they will be allowed to continue their journey promptly. So, this is the substance of the communications that we've had with the Iranians so far today, and it's a situation that we're going to continue to watch closely.
So the White House was watching, just keeping an eye on things passively. I mean, you and I watch because we're spectators, we're mere citizens. We're desperate to know about the safety of the world, and if Iran, a country building nukes and missiles, is wild and rogue and dangerous. But we have to be passive because we're not the commander-in-chief of the world's largest military. But Barack Obama, just watching, and so grateful for Iran to be affording the American hostages all the expected courtesies. Really, is that what it's called? Seizing and boarding and commandeering 2 U.S. boats and holding the Marines in a cell and putting the woman in a hijab. Such courtesy. Those Iranians are world famous for their hospitality. So Jake Tapper of CNN tries again, but Obama's spokesman, he really liked his line about how courteous the Iranians were. Take a listen.
Did they give any sort of reason for taking 10 American sailors into captivity?
Well, Jake, the circumstances, we're still learning more about the precise circumstances of this particular incident, so I don't want to say anything based on the first unconfirmed information that we have at this point. The thing I can tell you is that we are watching this closely, and we have received assurances from the Iranians that our sailors are safe and that they will be allowed to continue their journey promptly.
When even CNN can't believe your surrenderist answers, maybe you're a bit too Jimmy Carter and not Ronald Reagan enough. So CNN's Tapper asked about the aircraft carrier incident.
What do you say to people who say Iran fired upon, not on, didn't hit, but fired a warning shot of sorts towards an American ship in the last couple weeks? They test fired, I believe, a ballistic missile in the last few weeks, and yet in a few days they're scheduled to have the relief of all those sanctions. The basic question being, this does not seem like a country that is ready to be welcomed back into the community of nations.
Iran is rogue, Iran is dangerous, and Obama wants to take sanctions off of them? Yeah, and he's going to.
That's right, Jake. And, certainly the United States has been concerned with the kind of provocative, destabilizing actions that have been a hallmark of Iranian behavior over the last several decades, in fact. And that's why, that is why the United States and this president made it a priority to organize the international community to reach an agreement with Iran that will prevent them from obtaining a nuclear weapon. This agreement is actually the best way for us to ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon.
It's not just Iran watching and laughing and cheering themselves. What lesson do you think North Korea is taking from this? China, Vladimir Putin in Russia, every Muslim terrorist in the world. What do you think? There is no provocation, no humiliation, no act of aggression that will make Obama defend the United States. In fact, literally while these men and women were being held hostage by the Islamic Republic of Iran, and while the Islamic State was murdering and raping its way through Syria and Iraq, Obama saved his anger and his lectures in his State of the Union address, not for Islamic radicals, but for American citizens for being so Islamophobic. Yet, I don't think Americans are naturally afraid of Islam, actually. I think they're afraid of radical Islam that's blowing things up, killing people, going on terrorist shooting sprees in San Bernardino, shooting cops in the street in Philadelphia, and taking Americans hostage in the Persian Gulf without their president caring. That's what they're afraid of. A president who is so passive, who doesn't care, and even rhetorically saves his scolding for our side, not for the other side. Well, today the whole sordid affair ended. Let me show you the headline on the BBC. U.S. apologizes for Iran naval incursion. The United States just apologized to Iran, apologized to its own hostage takers. But of course, last night was Obama's last State of the Union address. In November this year, Americans will vote for a new president. He or she will take office in 1 year from now. But the damage done to American interests will last for many years, many decades to come. Stay with us for more. Welcome back to the show. Well, while those U.S. boats and 10 servicemen were being held hostage by Iran, Barack Obama was delivering his State of the Union address, in which he did not mention that military diplomatic situation. That was one of many strange things about his address, and joining us now via Skype from California is our friend Joel Pollak, the editor-at-large of Breitbart.com. Joel wrote an interesting piece, The Top 10 Lies in Obama's State of the Union address. Joel, great to see you again.
Good to be with you.
You know, it's such a disconnect. Obama's world, where it's about himself, and I don't know if anyone's counted the number of instances in which he used the words I and me in his State of the Union address. Wouldn't shock me if it was more than 100. So there's Obama world, and then there's reality, where the U.S. Navy was being humiliated in the Persian Gulf. It's incredible they didn't even mention that, wasn't it?
Absolutely amazing, and even more incredible that he said in his speech that we were respected around the world again, thanks to him, that nobody dared mess with us because we're the strongest military power in the world. And, of course, he said this just hours after Iran had seized 2 U.S. Navy boats and 10 sailors. I mean, an obvious provocation, if not an outright attack. We still don't know all the details, but definitely his claim that no nation dares to attack us or our allies because they know that's the path to ruin is absolutely false. In fact, we're getting attacked. Our allies are getting attacked more and more. So we're actually at a weak point, hardly a strong point.
Well, here, we got 3 video clips, and these were chosen in part from your top 10 list. Let's start with one about the U.S. economy. The lowest labor force participation rate in a generation. That means more people than ever just not even trying to get work. Nearly 50 million people on food stamps. Let me play you a clip from Barack Obama about how awesome the U.S. economy is. Take a look.
Anyone claiming that America's economy is in decline is peddling fiction.
What do you say, Joel? Are they peddling fiction or are they looking at the statistics?
Well, I think there's a case to be made that the economy is improving, but there's also a case to be made that parts of it are declining. And in fact, Democrats are making that case on the campaign trail. You hear Hillary Clinton and especially Bernie Sanders going out there and attacking the Obama economy, saying that more needs to be done. I think Obama was taking a dig not just at Republicans there, but also at Democrats. He doesn't appreciate them going out and telling the world what a bad job he's done, what terrible economic straits we're in. Whether they believe it or not is a separate issue, but certainly the American people believe it. Overwhelmingly, people see a future that is more bleak, and they believe the country's heading in the wrong direction. Now, we have positive growth. We haven't always. We had a quarter last year where our economy actually contracted. But we have some signs of life, so I think it would have been more accurate for Obama to say those who say we're only heading in a negative direction are not telling the truth. But we are, in some respects, in decline, and certainly it's how many Americans feel about the economy. So in that respect, Obama is basically calling more than half of the American people liars, which, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if he did. He's trying to defend his legacy, but nevertheless, it's just not true.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why illegal immigration is a big issue is not just cultural reasons and national security reasons and crime reasons. It's also when you bring in low-skilled, illegal workers, that drives down wages. So if you're a dot-com millionaire or billionaire, you're doing great. There are some pockets of the economy doing well, but in places like California, when you have cheap illegal labor coming in, that's driving things down on the income side and pushing up housing costs. I think that Obama was actually dissing a lot of the Democrat base, working poor people. Anyways, let's move on to two more clips from his State of the Union address. These are taken from your column today. You alluded to this before, where Obama said, no one dares to mess with the United States around the world. Here, take a look.
No nation attacks us directly or our allies because they know that's the path to ruin. Surveys show our standing around the world is higher than when I was elected to this office, and when it comes to every important international issue, people of the world do not look to Beijing or Moscow to lead, they call us.
It's so weird. This whole speech was delivered in such a high octave. I don't quite understand why he was talking that high. Maybe he was tense about something. That's how I am when I'm tense. But it's just not true. I mean, not only did America have its boat seized yesterday, but America's ally, a written treaty called the Budapest Memorandum, Russia just rolled into Ukraine. Ukraine's an American ally. America didn't stop it. America and its allies are under attack, maybe not so much by nations, but it's under attack every day.
Absolutely. And our enemies are getting more and more aggressive. Our allies in the Western Pacific are very worried because China is advancing territorial claims and naval claims that they find to be threatening. People are challenging us, testing us. We have a really rough year ahead in the last year of Obama's presidency because he has definitely shown himself to be weak in the face of these tests. Cuba, for example, has just stolen a Hellfire missile. We're really looking into this Iranian deal very carefully and what's happened to those sailors. But, aside from our own soldiers or our allies being attacked, Cuba has a Hellfire missile that they obtained somehow that they could use to transfer technology to Iran or North Korea. And this happened in the middle of last year while we were supposed to be normalizing relations with with Cuba. And that did not affect the negotiations whatsoever. We just treated it like it never happened. So our enemies understand that they have a year left, basically, to do whatever they want. And I think you saw an example of that yesterday with the seizure of the two Navy boats in Iran.
Yeah, and they all watch each other. I mean, Vladimir Putin's watching, North Korea's watching. They detonated what they say was a hydrogen bomb a week or so ago, and no reaction. Hey, I want to just play one more clip because I made a distinction between attacks against America and its allies by formal countries, like Russia attacking Ukraine, Iran seizing those boats. But of course, the main threat, the threat from Iraq, Syria to San Bernardino and Philadelphia, are Islamic terrorists. And take a listen to what Obama said about that.
For more than a year, America has led a coalition of more than 60 countries to cut off ISIL's financing, disrupt their plots, stop the flow of terrorist fighters, and stamp out their vicious ideology. With nearly 10,000 airstrikes, we're taking out their leadership, their oil, their training camps, their weapons. We're training, arming, and supporting forces who are steadily reclaiming territory in Iraq and Syria.
It's true that the borders of the Islamic State wax and wane, and it's true that they are being killed by the thousand. But new terrorist troops come to join them every day. What do you say to that, Joel?
Americans have no confidence in Obama's leadership on terrorism, and that was one of the number one issues that people said they were concerned about going into this speech. There was nothing in this speech to reassure people that anything was really being done about it. There was no mention of the San Bernardino terror attacks. He's basically adrift from reality, and he has no words really to describe what's happening. He said it so many times before incorrectly. I mean, on the day of the San Bernardino terror attacks, we had footage aired of him saying there was no real threat from ISIS. He's just so out of touch that I don't think he really could have hoped to convince anybody that he's doing a good job. He just declares it and hopes enough people believe it. Certainly his most ardent fans will believe anything that comes out of his mouth. But the Republican State of the Union response, which I thought was rather tepid and weak, did make one point, which is that Obama doesn't have the will or the ability to fight terrorism. And I think that's something, ironically, because he did order the killing of Osama bin Laden, it's something that has really come to define Obama's second term more than any other failure. And it's rather striking how far he's fallen in the public's estimation. But there you have it. Americans just do not trust him, and nothing he says is really going to change that.
Yeah, you know, the one thing he did talk about Islamic terrorism, besides puffing up what tepid effort he's made against the Islamic State, is to hector and lecture Americans again about being Islamophobic. Whenever there's a terrorist attack on America abroad or at home, that's what he reaches for, shaming Americans for being so bigoted and demanding to take away guns from Americans. That's typical Obama. Well, I guess there's just 1 year left of this. Joel Pollak, editor-at-large of Breitbart.com, thanks so much for joining us today.
Good to be with you.
Stay with us. After the break, my friend Lorne Gunter, senior columnist from the Edmonton Sun, on where Rachel Notley stands in her plans for 2016. Stay with us.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know the Rebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to the rebel.media/store to find out more.
Welcome back to the program. You know, one of the things that Rachel Notley says when pressed about why she's bringing in a carbon tax on Alberta is she says it's to get Alberta market access. The theory being that if Alberta punches itself in the nose with a carbon tax, that will make critics of the oil sands less likely to oppose it, which is bizarre in theory, but here's how it's worked out in practice. Since Rachel Notley has become premier, the Keystone XL pipeline has been rejected by Barack Obama. She herself has rejected the Northern Gateway pipeline to BC, and Justin Trudeau, the new prime minister, has announced he's going to bring in a de facto tanker ban. And just this week, British Columbia said it opposes the final pipeline to the west called the Trans Mountain Pipeline. There's one more pipeline, the proposed Energy East pipeline that goes all the way to New Brunswick, but Notley hasn't lifted a finger to promote it. So what's really going on here? Well, joining us now via Skype from Edmonton is my friend Lorne Gunter, senior columnist for the Edmonton Sun. Hey, Lorne, great to see you again.
Hey, good to see you, Ezra.
Now, I never believed the NDP excuse for why they were against pipelines. They always said, oh, we want to keep the jobs in Alberta. We don't want to export jobs. Well, they would never approve a refinery in a million years. No one would build a refinery under these tax circumstances. But even if they did, you got to export the refined product. These NDP will just say anything to get them through the moment. They're just against oil and gas, full stop. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I really do think that that's ultimately what's behind this, is that they have no interest at all in pipelines or refineries. You know, if they are truly serious about a refinery, where are their plans? Because a refinery would take anywhere from 7 to 10 years to get up and operational. They'd have to have their own regulatory and environmental hearings. They might be subject to National Energy Board regulations or hearings. I doubt that, but there's some possibility of that. And then, as you correctly say, you'd still have to have pipelines to take the refined product out of here. It's not as though we're going to consume all of the refined oil here in Alberta. So pipelines are essential. When the NDP say things like, we need to have our own energy strategy, our own climate strategy. We have to play the game. We have to go along with international efforts to reduce greenhouse emissions, to bring in global warming, reduce the chances of disastrous climate change, because that will give us the social license. That's the term they like to use. The social license we need in order to sell our pipelines and get approval from other jurisdictions. But other jurisdictions are only worried about the politics. I mean, we saw that really, really clearly this week when BC rejected Kinder Morgan's twinning of its Trans Mountain pipeline from the oil sands to Burnaby, to a refinery and to a terminal, a tanker terminal in Burnaby. That wasn't about anything about science. It wasn't about climate change. You know, Kinder Morgan had submitted 16,000 pages of documents, answered 17,000 questions from the National Energy Board and from interveners. And the BC government said, wasn't enough. We don't have enough information. We don't know whether they'll comply with our environmental regulations or not. That's absolute rubbish. Because all the BC government was concerned about is that people in BC don't want pipelines running through their province. More pipelines. They already have lots of them. And so this was never, ever about the environment or about global warming or Alberta's refusal to participate under the Tories in international treaties like Kyoto and Paris. It was never about that. It's always all about politics.
Yeah, but I mean, and that's fine. We've always known that. But it's also Rachel Notley's own politics. She is against the pipelines. When she says, oh, this will buy the cooperation of the enemies of oil, she's talking about her own party, the federal NDP, the BC NDP that ran against.
The Alberta NDP. At least half of her caucus, before they were surprisingly elected, surprised themselves at being elected last May, were adamantly against big oil, against the oil sands. I mean, lots and lots. As you did some of the very best research yourself on all of this, and you know the rest of us have dug up some of these too. All sorts of tweets and Facebook posts from members who are now members of the NDP caucus in Alberta who called the oil sands the tar sands and said it was the worst environmental development project in the world. I mean, we know all of this. Her own education minister led a rally on the steps of the legislature in 2008. Where he talked about, you know, the crimes against humanity committed by big oil companies and oil sands. So
David Eggen, he led the chant, no new approvals, no new, we've shown that clip before.
Right. Yeah,
It's so frustrating.
So it's not just the BC NDP, it's not the federal NDP alone, it's the Alberta NDP too. And so she's walking this fine line between needing the money from the oil companies and the royalties and the revenues to fund all of her enormous spending. I mean, we're going to go into debt, about $17 or $18 billion in debt now. By the time the NDP's first term is over, we should be about $48 billion in debt. They're going to add about $30 billion in debt to Alberta. And she needs tons of money for that. So that's the only reason, the only single reason she's behind pipelines, theoretically behind pipelines, is that she needs the cash.
Yeah, that's just incredible. I got a question for you. I listened to the rhetoric of these cabinet ministers and the premier herself, and they're not regular politicians. I mean, I remember when they were elected, people were saying, oh, they'll be like the NDP in Saskatchewan, they'll balance a budget, they'll want to get reelected. They're human beings, and they live in the province, and they want to get reelected. No. Because they thought they had no chance of winning when most of their people were nominated, they nominated hardcore activists, union leaders, the kind of people who said, yeah, sure, put my name down, it'll never happen. So when you listen to those hardcore ideological activists, I mean, remember that Notley herself used to wear a watch with Che Guevara on it, and that was not like a novelty item. It was a symbol. She had literally communists in her party. And I'm not using that as an insult. That's how they describe themselves. So when things are going disastrously, 100,000 people laid off in 2015, disastrous finances, suicides up, food bank up, unemployment up more than 100% in EI claims. Whereas a normal politician would say, oh, well, maybe we should dial back. No, the tone of voice that Shannon Phillips, the environment minister, that Premier Notley uses is, no, I'm used to fighting. I'm an Alberta New Democrat. I'm used to fighting back. I'll fight anyone. She's talking about fighting Albertans. Like she's not, who's against her? Who's she fighting? I think there's a viciousness and an anger, and they're only going to try these things harder in 2016. They're not going to pull back. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. They're going to double down. And we're already seeing that because every poll that has been done since she announced this carbon tax back in November, which is basically a provincial sales tax. Let's not kid anybody. Yeah. It is so broadly based. It's on so many different items. It's really a provincial sales tax. But she knows she would be, there'd be her effigy burned on the steps of the legislature the day after she announced the PST. So she calls it a carbon tax, hoping that people who are concerned about the environment will go along with it. But what is going to happen in the next year, as they found that this is more and more unpopular, she said the other day, she said it's only going to be temporary. This is 2016. Next year, 2017, happens to be the centennial of the temporary income tax that was introduced to help us pay for World War I. Yeah. And that income tax, of course, is still there. So this carbon tax is as temporary as the income tax, I guarantee you. But that's what's happening to them. They're getting squeezed. They're not popular at all anymore. Yeah. They're popular in Edmonton to some extent because Edmonton has such a huge public sector workforce. Yeah. But outside of Edmonton, they're not popular at all. They're already feeling the squeeze. As oil goes down below $30 a barrel, they start to look at their spring budget. They realize they're going to have to make spending cuts. They didn't make any spending cuts in their fall financial statement. They're probably going to have to make some real spending cuts or some huge tax increases, neither of which they want to do. We're headed for Ray days. That's what we're headed for.
Yeah.
Well, remember the 90s with Bob Ray. He spent a lot of money till his last couple of years, then he didn't have any money left to spend. He started cutting back on public sector wages, and that really bothered people.
You know, I should do a segment one day on the key number in the Alberta Notley budget, which was the prediction of the price of oil. That wouldn't be important in any other province, but in Alberta, when it's such a source of royalties and taxes, it's a very important number. And if I'm going from memory here, Lorne, they predicted that the price of oil in 2016 on average would be about $50. And next year would be about $60. They are overestimating by 50% the amount of revenues they're going to get. That's the disaster. Last word to you, Lorne.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's only going to get worse for them because, housing prices are down. There's no interest in investment. People are waiting to see what happens with the NDP. So we will see, I think, slow times in Alberta until at least 2019 when the NDP are thrown out. If oil doesn't go back to $110 a barrel, if it goes up to $100 a barrel, all bets are off. Yeah. Money will start flowing in again. But unless that happens, I don't think it's going to happen by 2019. You will see very little investment here until the NDP are punted from office.
Yeah. You know what I'm looking for in 2016? Watch for the crony capitalism to kick in because, of course, the flip side of their carbon tax that they want to bring in 2018, they're going to take in $6 billion, they claim, but $3 billion of it will be given in subsidies to their favorite, quote, green companies. Watch for that. That's my prediction, is you're going to see all these lobbyists and connected union types and NDP insiders getting huge grants.
And big companies. Like already we have one of the utilities in Alberta, TransAlta, who has said that it's okay with closing its coal-fired power plant. It's going to go into alternate energy. Well, where's it going to get the money for that? Yeah. It's not going to get it from private investors. It's going to get it from the carbon tax. So, yeah you're exactly right. Yeah.
Lorne Gunter, senior columnist, Edmonton Sun, what a pleasure to talk with you. Look forward to seeing you soon. Folks, stick around after the break. Your viewer feedback. Stay with us.
Ontario residents are being hosed on electricity prices. The latest Auditor General's report says we've been overcharged by $37 billion over the last several years. That works out to nearly $2,800 for every man, woman, and child. Why? Mismanagement and bad policy choices from the Ontario Liberals. It's going to cost us billions more in coming years. Energy Minister Bob Chiarelli won't take responsibility. He's lashing out. It's time for Bob to go. If you agree, go to firebob.ca. That's firebob.ca and make your voice heard.
Welcome back. My favorite part of the show, viewer feedback. Paul from Welland writes, you were spot on, Ezra, with your comment that Obama is taking a leaf from Trudeau's script with the false emotions. There are far too many similarities between these two leaders. I am afraid we are traveling down the same road as did the USA, starting with a call for change, which is with a driver that is out of control. Look, I don't mind calls for change, but change to what and for what reason? The radicals always want to tear things down, but radicals aren't as good at building things up, are they? Barack Obama, what has he built in his life? What has Justin Trudeau built in his life? Part of Donald Trump's appeal is that he's positive, he's a builder, he's a success, not without failures, but he tries. Obama is a true leftist radical. He wants to tear things down. Trudeau isn't a thinker or an activist like Obama is. He has leftist instincts that he obviously inherited from listening to his father, but when Justin Trudeau tries to articulate them, you can tell the last time he really thought about those ideas was when he was a young child listening to his dad at the dinner table or something. It's like listening to a 10-year-old boy repeat what his dad said over dinner. That's how Trudeau sounds today. No, the brains behind Trudeau is a true radical, Gerald Butts, the Marxist environmentalist who's now Trudeau's principal secretary. And in a way, the brains behind Obama is his principal advisor, the Iranian-born Valerie Jarrett. But both Obama and Trudeau have greater gifts. They're actors, they're emoters. They talk about their feelings and are in touch with vacuous popular culture like selfies. And there's enough people out there, students, people on welfare, unserious people, for whom that's enough, that's appealing. So it's enough to win in the US and enough to eke out 39% of the vote here in Canada. Mike writes in, he says, last night on QR77 radio in Calgary, host and bleeding heart liberal Dan Reendow was discussing the Syrian refugees issue with, of course, a fellow bleeding heart liberal. I sent him a text asking to have you on as a guest, and this is the response I got. And here is the text that was sent to me that says, I won't have him on, quote, because he's an insane person. Thanks, Mike. I mean, it's sad what's happened to talk radio in so many parts of Canada. I remember when, I'm from Calgary, I remember when QR77 was the strongest, most conservative radio station in the country, anchored by the great Dave Rutherford. And there was Charles Adler and Roy Green, and in Ottawa, Lowell Green, and so many great conservatives. They're mostly gone. Now it's all bland, vanilla, politically correct liberalism, even in Calgary, which is pretty much the opposite of the culture of talk radio. I mean, talk radio is about talking two-way discussions, not one-way lectures. It's about taking calls from ordinary people, even anonymous people. It's not about telling ordinary people what the official line is. Any real talk show host worth their salt who really disagreed with me should say, well, Ezra's insane, so let me invite him on the show and demonstrate why he's wrong or insane. And at the very least, it would be entertaining and good for ratings. But this guy, who I've never heard of before, would rather have a love-in, a mutual admiration conversation with another liberal in Calgary, rather than to actually let a real debate break out. I never heard of this guy. I don't listen to QR77 because I'm out here in Toronto. I'm not lacking in means to get my own message out. As you can see, I'm just commenting on the sad state of the mainstream media, where even in the most conservative city in Canada, talk radio is a liberal love. And that's sad, but it's also why we're growing here at The Rebel. Christy writes and says, you should be ashamed of yourself. The truth about refugees? Far from it. You have no actual facts backing anything up. You are racist, ignorant, afraid, and trying to spread that fear. I hope that someday you will realize that you have extremist views, just like any other extremist you condemn on your site. We can all meet in the middle. We actually have to, in order for the human race to survive. Life is about much more than religion and population wars. Hi, Christy. I'm always open to correction if I get my facts wrong. Sometimes I do get my facts wrong. I mean, I do an hour or so of TV a day, plenty of writing, always on a tight deadline. So it's possible to get my facts wrong, but you haven't named one fact I've got wrong, and I've done 100 stories of refugees. I try to document my facts in real time. I show you a video clip. I show you a photo. I quote from an official document and other news sources. So I'm always showing my work, so to speak. I mean, we have done more than 2,000 videos here at the Rebel.media since we launched, but you haven't cited a single fact we've got wrong. Why not? I think I know why, because what you really disagree with isn't my facts, it's my opinions. You think my opinions are wrong, but instead of making the case, you just name call. My favorite, though, is your typical wishy-washy answer. We could all meet in the middle. Hey, Christy, how do you meet in the middle with Muslim terrorists? They say convert to Islam or die. Not a lot of middle ground there. I guess for a Christian woman like you, you're named Christy, there is another alternative between convert to Islam or die, and that is to become a rape slave for the Islamic State. It's just another option, I guess. So how do you split the difference on that one, Christy? Where's the middle ground with those people? Muslim terrorists want to stone adulterous women to death. They want to throw gays off the tops of high-rise buildings. They want to murder Jews. Where's the halfway point there, Christy? Tell you what, you feel free to split the difference with your own life and safety and freedom. I'm going to fight for mine and that of my family and my country. Mark writes, hello, Ezra. Could you explain the difference between the Canadian law enforcement accommodation for the Sikh turban, exclusive to men, versus the upcoming RCMP hijab, exclusive to women? That is a great question. And yesterday I talked about the separation of mosque and state. Let me explain to you why I have come to accept and in fact embrace a Sikh turban in our uniform, whereas yesterday I told you why I object to a Muslim hijab. The first thing is the most compelling to me, is that for literally centuries, going back nearly 200 years, Sikhs wearing turbans have been an integral part of the armed forces of the British Empire. In fact, once the Sikhs stopped fighting the Brits in India, they became the most passionate soldiers in the British military, with their turbans as an official part of Queen Victoria's armed forces. And turban-wearing Sikhs served loyally in the world wars along with the Allies in far-flung places, not in India. So Sikhs wearing turbans are part of the British Empire and in a way the Canadian tradition. So that's my first point. They have been around fighting side by side to free the rest of the Commonwealth. They are Canadian, and those Sikh turbans were part of the official uniform. That's point one. Point two, a Sikh man wearing a turban, it's a source of pride, a demonstration of the warrior culture of Sikhism. A Muslim woman wearing a hijab is a sign of subordination, of being kept under wraps, of being haram, dirty if she's unwrapped, or halal, clean if she's under wraps. It is the exact opposite in meaning of a Sikh turban. And finally, my third difference is that Sikhism requires the turban as a religious precept, whereas the hijab is a manifestation of political Islam. It is flying a flag of politics. It is not a commandment in the Quran. That, my friend, is why I accept and in fact have come to embrace a man like Harjit Sajjan, our defense minister, who fought like hell on our side in Afghanistan wearing a turban. That is part of the Canadian tradition. A hijab, that is a setback of the Canadian tradition of equality for men and women. It is not our culture. Last letter, our managing producer, Hannah, writes, Ezra, it's time to get a haircut. All right, I accept that. She put that in the prompter so I would read it, and I will get a haircut. From all of us here at the Rebel.Media, I hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you tomorrow. Keep fighting for freedom, everyone.